By show of hands, if we have people who are actively engaged in the cultural sectors, just by a show of hands, quickly. So there's Suniti, and I've seen some little pokey hands going up, so that's about 3. I imagine we have some economists because we're at the university, show of hands, and technical people. Bankers, and I don't know what the others would be, just interested persons. So that there's one indication of even a conference like this and the kinds of interests coming together, because we should really have a lot more of the people engaged in the cultural and creative sectors a part of this discussion. But nonetheless, I'd like to thank the university for the opportunity to weigh in here. I don't have a PowerPoint, and in fact, I would just like to have a conversation to flag a couple of things, because I think both preceding presentations, if we had the benefit of sitting together, a number of things have been addressed from, some of them are cross-cutting already, but have raised some critical issues. But I just want to flag one thing, and I think that particularly for our young people, the students who are here, and who would be probably moving on into university, I think it's very important as we talk about all of these international, this spaghetti phenomenon of trade agreements and multilateral instruments and the rest of it, that we have to be very careful that we don't seek to institute or to inculcate models of development that actually replicate the same economic models that have worked to our detriment in other sectors. I think that's very critical. And so this is a role, I think, for our university and certainly for our academics, because our approach to these policies, we're hearing about the UNESCO Convention and the intersection between culture and trade, actually seeks to reinforce a model of development and models of development that are really not in our best interests. But we have to continue to play in the game, so that it's a discussion that requires much more critical analysis and discussion. But you know, if I could just invoke the memory of people like Lloyd Best and Dennis Panton, it would be that we have to be thinking in terms of this new creative economy that we seek to build, a knowledge economy predicated on a sense of using our capital, our knowledge, and our sense of what kind of Caribbean society we want to build, as opposed to just basically taking templates that exist from outside and saying this is how we have to adapt our course of development in order to be successful. I am going to be double and triple dipping, because a number of issues have already been touched on and are food for thought by the 2 previous speakers, particularly Susan, who did an excellent job of trying to give a sense of this ecosystem. And I think we're at a little disadvantage, because oftentimes this discussion about the cultural economy, the creative economy, is an addendum. But I do thank the university, and Roger in particular, because we had some very long discussions about including it. So that's a long preamble. I'm going to use a quote. I wish I had a quote, Suniti, that I could use from Lloyd that was readily available. But I'm going to use a quote because we like to quote outside. And this is a quote from the World Property Intellectual Organization in 2003, which says, "Today, a state does not have to be lucky, in inverted commas, in terms of its possession of land, labor, and capital to succeed. Creativity and innovation are the new drivers of the world economy, and national well-being increasingly depends on the strategy of a country and the strategies it develops to harness its intellectual capital. An effective intellectual property system is the foundation of such a strategy. And within knowledge-based, innovation-driven economies, the intellectual property system is a dynamic tool for wealth creation, providing an incentive for enterprises and individuals to create and innovate, a fertile setting for the development of and trade in intellectual assets, and a stable environment for domestic and foreign investment." I thought what I would do, because I mean, I didn't have to think about the kind of presentation that someone like Susan would give. I wasn't sure about Brian, and he's had so many disclaimers, not representing TAT, not representing the university, etc. So I thought what I would do, and I didn't know we would have so many students, is I would cull from a concept paper that has just been developed for Canto, which is the regional organization that links telecoms operators, because we're all flying off, the seat of our pants talking about the technological revolution, the digital age, the future is here, how it's the great leveler, it's the thing that's going to make us compete effectively. And that in itself is another debate, because when we look at our own domestic environment, not just Trinidad and Tobago, but in the region, while we have all of these things going on, liberalization, etc., we're not supporting with very basic things, strengthening IP systems, looking at digital rights management legislation, data protection, e-commerce settlement systems, all those kinds of things that sound very highfalutin but are actually very necessary to support a digital economy, which is the driver of this knowledge economy we're talking. So I want to use my experience and knowledge of the broadcast and and the convergence of broadcast and telecommunications to flag a couple of things. And to speak to the convergence of audiovisual media as we know it, the broadcast sector, broadband networks, the things that TSTT and Digicel and others and the Americas fiber optic cables are rolling out, and using the devices, the iPods, the iPads, the mobile phones, etc. And the fact that we know that these have created real opportunities in the ICT and content sectors globally. Convergence has also created new delivery channels for traditional formats, as well as pathways to the development of interactive content and services, content such as music, games, films, television, and radio programs, books, and sport. All are now available on fixed as well as mobile platforms. At the same time, what we're seeing is this increasing phenomenon of user-generated content with a strong interactive character. This is also blooming. So we know everybody here, more or less, even people who didn't want to come onto it, is on Facebook, Flickr, Digit, MySpace, and they continue to increase. And people in music are on Zune and the rest of it. Good examples of the user-generated and user-produced content are the sharing of videos on the internet, broadcast yourself on YouTube, and the explosion of the blogosphere, blogs, as large numbers of people are creating their own news and they're driving traffic to their own social media sites. And we're doing it in innocuous ways, and some of us are doing it as a living, some of us are doing it as running political commentary, industry, etc. TV, film, and publishing have followed the music sector in going online to access new audiences and consumers, while new revenue streams exist in video games, animation, and lifestyles. Now, some of that is taking place in the region, and I don't know, maybe in the question and answer time, we'll talk about how much of that is being supported, why it's not being supported sufficiently, and what we may need to be doing to support the innovation and technological developments that are really taking place in an organic way, but have all kinds of obstacles and challenges to face, access to capital, etc. Let me just, for those who don't know the broadcast sector very well, we have to see when we have the cable company, which is a monopoly now, even though it's doing its good work in terms of providing support for local content, because we did have more than one cable operator before. We need to understand when we make reference to the fact that we're now net importers sometimes of our own content, but it has to go out to come back in because of the lack of support in the local environment, we need to understand what this market context of the global audiovisual industry is. And it's important to know that the domination of the media environment in the developing regions of the world, the Hollywoods, Canada, Europe, etc., is dominated by a few global corporations, and this has been accelerating since the 1980s. It's a strategic move. It's not happening by accident. And the last 2 decades has seen a wave of media mergers which have produced a very complex web of business relationships that now define the global media space and what we term popular culture. It is not by accident that there is convergence between media, entertainment, and technological or technology businesses. Steve Jobs was not sitting in some little cave somewhere thinking that he's just going to create some new application. We now know the phenomenon of iTunes and now iPad. This ensures that a few corporations have the massive opportunity to cross-promote and sell talent and products among different companies owned by the same powerful parent corporations. And that's why I say we can't continue to just buy cat and bag and say, well, that's the model. We need to understand the complexity of the way the business is organized and the impact it's having on our regions, and even the way in which our businesses will have to approach doing the uplinking and the distribution of our content. As this beat of convergence goes on, the communications and entertainment giants have been able to determine the quality, the quantity, and the pricing of cultural products and services in the global marketplace. And this has very real implications for the survival of our homegrown creative sectors like our recorded music business, our publishing industry, our media companies, many in our broadcast sector who seem not to hear for whom the bell tolls, and their ability to compete fairly in the global marketplace. We already know that the Caribbean excels at creative products, at creating creative products and services. But it has not yet been able to fully embrace the opportunities to produce and distribute the content in the new formats, because we haven't even done it well in the traditional areas. When we look at how much local content we have on our local TV stations, meaning not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but the region. So if we have not done it there, I don't know how we're replicating a successful business model in the new world of new media and next generation technologies yet to come. Of particular interest to the Caribbean should be the increasing integration between tourism and entertainment, which has been flagged by Susan as maybe one of the flagship planks on which we can build out from the low-hanging fruit what we have, as it becomes more apparent that in order to develop and retain lucrative tourism markets, we need to identify and promote cultural or entertainment hooks on which we can hang our different and individual appeal in the region. So that point has been discussed. Regional telecoms like our TSTT, and in the case of the Eastern Caribbean, Lime, which is the TSTT brand in partnership with Cable & Wireless, who's our 51% partner, and ISPs and others who are now coming onto the market. We have Green Dot in Trinidad and others, and even Flow, have made some tentative steps to embrace content. But the opportunity to partner with content creators to build strong online distribution platforms for content are yet to be fully seized. And at the same time, our content producers, our content aggregators, and our entertainment or creative enterprises have not been able to reach local, meaning we're not consuming enough of what we're creating ourselves, diaspora, which is, wherever we are in the world, and we have significant markets outside in metropolitan centers, and new consumers, who I describe as people, if we look at some of the statistical information that we may be able to get our hands on, Barbados and the Eastern Caribbean, for example, have really sufficient enough data to demonstrate that they have repeat tourism. So these are new consumers because these are people who keep coming back to the region, clearly for something more than what they've had the first time around. So it means that when they go back to where they live, where they work, and what have you, they are potential consumers for goods and services from the region because they keep coming back here for an experience. That's a market that we need, or those are markets we need to be looking at. So in order to be able to do that, we're going to be needing things like affordable bandwidth, fast digital networks, affordable, really, really affordable bandwidth, and accessible by all, not just for what the definition by TSTT is of a small enterprise, which is like 5 or 10 people or whatever it is. Try to get a corporate plan and you understand what I'm talking about. So that is one of the key paradigm shifts that Susan and Brian have spoken to in a different way that I'm just sort of confronting frontally. That we have to embrace this paradigm shift more earnestly. A little bit of background very quickly about the Caribbean and the market for online content in the creative sectors, because it's just emerging. We are not supporting, we're talking about innovation, but we're not supporting our innovators not only in the creative